Hey, I love Elden Ring. It is probably my favorite game of all time. But you know what I don't love? Ranking bosses. That's why instead of ranking all the Elden Ring bosses, I'm going to start a new series called Area by Area, where I go in detail about an area in a game to try to determine whether I think it's good or I think it's terrible. I think Stormveil Castle is the perfect way to start this series, as it is the first area of my favorite game. I will be reviewing these areas based on 4 different criteria: presentation, layout, rewards, and combat. Presentation includes the area's aesthetic, music, and solely the visual design of enemies and how well they blend with the area. Layout is based on how fun the area is to explore, whereas rewards are based on if your exploration feels meaningful. I guess they kind of tie in together, so I will just combine them, I guess. And finally, combat is how fun the enemies and bosses are to fight. At the end of the presentation section, I will be giving a rating out of 10, whereas the other 2 will be out of 20. This is because I think presentation matters a lot less than an area's layout and combat, so each area will end up being rated out of 50. I'm very excited to start this series. I love talking about bosses, but areas are really most of the game. Anyways, let's begin. While presentation isn't a huge factor on what makes an area good or not, it can make a difference in how memorable the area is. Elden Ring has a lot of castles, whether they are major ones like Stormveil or smaller ones like Castle Morn. With so many castles, a lot of them, especially the minor ones, feel kinda samey. Stormveil, however, feels so different to everything else in the game. This is the first major dungeon of Elden Ring, yet it feels like an area you would often find later on in a game. When first approaching Stormveil, the entire castle looms over you. It makes you feel small and hopeless. A stormy cloud coats the entire castle as well. It is so sick. This is only what you see when walking up to the castle. As you enter it, you would notice that the floor of the castle is littered with barricades, ballistas, and guards. But the inside walls are admittedly very empty of design. I actually like this, as it reflects the demigod of this area, Godric. Scary and intimidating from the outside, but scared and pathetic on the inside. We will talk more about him in the combat section. The Exile Soldiers, which are the most common enemy in Stormveil, fit well into the area's presentation. They are not some over-the-top godly beings, they are just knights you would expect to find in a castle like Stormveil. The other enemies featured here are appropriately dull and grey, fitting right into the atmosphere of the area. There is an omen here though for some reason. Lore nerds, can you please help me? The music, however, is kinda just there. It's not bad, it suits Stormveil well, it just isn't very memorable. There isn't that much else to say. I think the presentation is great. However, when compared to other areas in Elden Ring, I don't think Stormveil hits quite as hard. It's the first area in the game. I'm surprised the presentation hits as hard as it does, but when you look at Farum Azula, Lanedale, Shadowkeep, you can tell that Stormveil is toned down just a bit. I would still give it an 8 out of 10. It's fantastic. The presentation here is as good as you can get with the first area of a game without going overboard. The layout of Stormveil is where this area really shines. What the fuck, Miyazaki? This feels less like a traditional area you would find in Dark Souls or Bloodborne, and more like a Mario sandbox level. Yes, there is an end goal to Stormveil, but there are so many ways to get there that it makes this area feel like an open playground to explore to your heart's content, only slightly more deadly than a playground. This idea of freedom is presented to you before you even enter the castle. Next to the main gate, there is a room with an NPC named Gostok. Gostok gives you 2 options in which you can infiltrate the castle: the main gate, which is heavily guarded by Exile Soldiers, or the side path, which is longer, but only slightly safer. Gostok heavily suggests you go the side path, but you can still be a dickhead and make him open the gate to the main path. He wasn't lying. The main path is infested with exile freaks, all of which want you dead. I will talk more about this path during the combat section, but for now, just know that this path is appropriately miserable to go through. There are some branching pathways here, one leading to the Divine Tower of Limgrave. This isn't really part of Stormveil though, so I won't be factoring it into my review. This eventually leads to the main area of Stormveil, but before I talk about that, I want to talk about the far more expansive side path. The side path is the way most players would go in their first playthrough. I didn't though. I am an elitist. You're on me, get off me. The side path begins with traversing through your typical grassy, rocky terrain, where you even encounter some hawks too. Get it? Fuck! It's pretty basic until you make it to the Site of Grace. This is where you enter the castle, and whoa. I guess Gostok just lied about there being less guards here. Thanks, buddy. The goal is to make it to this one room where... Okay, I made this joke already. Here you defeat a banished knight and obtain a key, where you can open a door and escape this confined area. I do also want to mention that the hook claws are here, which is a great early game weapon, especially for new players. The ladder that is after the locked door takes you to the top floor, where you can go left, leading you further into Stormveil, or you can go right, where you find the brick hammer, a decent strength weapon, but not very reliable for early game as it requires 31 strength. Following the left path takes you to a room with a lift and a banished knight. You can't access this lift yet, but remember that it exists. Continuing this path will take you to a site of grace, but if you continue to make your way upwards, you can get access to the rooftops. Yes, of course you can traverse the rooftops. This is Elden Peak, remember? The rooftops give you access to a stone sword key, this cool view, and a fight against a hawk tuah, on top of making the process of getting from one place to another easier. Back to the site of grace, you can continue to make your way forward, or you can go backwards, where there is another lift that you can't access right now. Going forward puts you in the site of hawk tuah barrel truckers, but also hidden here is an entirely secret area which takes you to a crucible knight and the lift in the room with the banished knight. Wow. From the barrel truckers path, you can jump to this rooftop, giving you access to another hidden area. Stop, Miyazaki, there is too much content, I can't take it. Going to the left takes you to the NPC Rogier. He wasn't there for me, I think he died on the way here. And going to the right takes you to more indoor areas, where you can see a painting of Godwyn and even refight the grafted sign, which I know you all died to at the start of the game, don't lie. Located here is also the lift that takes you right back to the previous site of grace. Miyazaki, stop, you are going to make me go. And finally, after exploring all these rooms, you will eventually find the doorway leading you to the main area of Stormveil. So yeah, I think this side path is slightly more content heavy than the main path. Of course, you can always do the main path and the side path backwards or vice versa, but I think doing the side path first gives you the best experience. There are so many other ways to access the main area through the side path, but I just wanted to mention this one because it takes you through the most content. We are nowhere near done with the layout and reward section though. This area is so big, holy scoopy banoopy. The main area is where a large majority of the exile soldiers are located. The best thing to do in my opinion is to run for your life until you make it to the grace right next to Godric. It gives you a closer and more convenient checkpoint for exploration. This main area's most important item is a golden seed, which is used to upgrade the amount of flasks you can hold. Near the golden seed is a room with the NPC Nefeli Lu. I understand you want to talk to me right now, Lu, but I'm a little bit busy. Spoilers for the combat section. Fuck these hawk tuahs! Making your way backwards leads to a cellar filled with rats. This leads to two chests, one with Godslayer's seal and one with Godskin Prayer Book, both very useful for players that want to use heavy incantations. This loops back to the main path. Back at the grace, going straight takes you to a bunch of sentient jars, which is one jar full. From here, taking a left takes you to a lift, where a grace is placed, much closer to the main area. But if you take this tiny path back where the jars were, you go on a goddamn journey. This leads to an area on top of the jars and outside the castle. This doesn't last long though, as soon you are back in the castle, just a much creepier area of it. Here you can find a door that gives you access to a previous grace, making getting back here much quicker. There are no exile soldiers here, just bats and rats, really adding to the unnerving vibe. The further down you go, the darker and more eerie it gets. There's no openness here, it's tight, almost like whatever's down here shouldn't be seen. Once past here, you fall down into a room with an ulcerated tree spirit. Beyond that, however, is the real reason why this place is so creepy. What's here is part of the misshapen corpse of Godwyn the Golden, the demigod that was murdered by Rani and the Black Knife assassins. This being here really elevates Stormveil to a whole new level. It was so cool discovering this for the first time. There is a talisman here named Prince of Death's Pustule. I definitely pronounced that wrong. It raises your vitality while also improving death blight resistance, very useful. Then finally, you can take a ladder that leads you all the way up to the area right next to Godwyn's painting, reminding you that yes, you are in Stormveil. Cinema. The last thing worth mentioning is the place after defeating Godric. Here you can find Nefeli Lu and Kenneth Hyde if you do their quest lines. I didn't though, I'm a prick. From here, you follow a linear path with a lack of any interesting items, unless you like grapes. They are a C tier fruit, sorry. This path takes you all the way to Lugania of the Lakes, ending the massive area of Stormveil. Yep, this is magnificent. Hopefully I covered everything noteworthy. Even if I didn't, I think you understand my point that this level is full of meaningful content and superb exploration. There are so many secrets here that there is a 100% chance I didn't find them all, which says a lot about an area's quality. This is getting a 19 out of 20. The only reason why it isn't getting a perfect score is I think the jump could have been used a little bit more. Don't get me wrong, the jump is still used amazingly, especially with rooftop traversal. I just think other areas in Elden Ring utilize it a little bit better. For a first area of a game, I genuinely don't think it is possible to get any better than this in terms of the layout and rewards. Combat is as important to an area as the layout is, in my opinion. I think it is best if we split combat into 3 sections: enemies, elite enemies, and bosses, or just boss when it comes to Stormveil. Enemies are important as they are what you are going to be fighting most of the time when traversing an area. Elite enemies are important as they provide combat challenges within an area to break up the long stretches of exploration. Bosses are important as they can either end an area on a high note or be utilized almost like an indication as to how far you are within the area, or they can be completely hidden and just be there for funsies. The most common type of enemy is of course the exile soldiers. These guys have a bunch of different variants like the sword, sword and shield, crossbow, great axe, torch, and the hornblower. The hornblower is unique as it alerts nearby exile soldiers of your location. It isn't exclusive to exile soldiers, but it's still cool. I like fighting all these types individually, especially the great axe ones, but enemies like these need to work well in groups, and for the side path, yeah, I think they work. They are spread out enough so you usually aren't getting gangbanged, unless you try sprinting past them all. There are also commoners here that throw bombs at you. They don't really do anything else. The main path, however, is an entirely different story. It is agony going through here. There are exile soldiers everywhere. The ones manning the ballistas can especially go die. I get that the point of the main path is to be miserable, guiding you into going through the side path, but shut up, let me be a crybaby. I reckon if they halved the amount of exile soldiers shooting ballistas at you, this area could have still been the very clear unintended path, but also not the most infuriating thing ever. I can't deduct too many points though, because 90% of players will not even consider going through here anyway. Exile soldiers also infest the main area of Stormveil, and wow, this makes exploring horrible. There are so many of them on the ground and on the sides that trying to pick them all off is an absolute nightmare, since all will try attacking you at once. Is this a skill issue? Probably. But I still think there are just too many of them to make going through here very fun. The other common enemy found in Stormveil, aside from the commoners, like I said, they do absolutely nothing, are the tuahs. I reckon you guys should sit down for this one. These guys are the worst enemies in all of Elden fucking Ring. They constantly fly out of your attack range, chase you until their ends of time, and generally just have a piss annoying moveset. These guys make me want to kill myself. There are 3 variants of these: the normal ones, the barrel chuckers, and the fire breathing ones. The normal ones are the ones you fight most commonly. I should stop calling them the normal ones, that's a little bit racist. The barrel chuckers are the same as the standard ones, but they throw an explosive barrel at you when you first aggro them. The fire breathing ones, however, are by far the worst. These guys are the spammiest spammers of them all, and are so annoying to hit with a melee weapon. They also spit fire at you, really putting the tuah in hot tuah. Just look at this fight I had against the rooftop one. Does this look even slightly fun? No, it doesn't. Banished Knights are found in quite a few places as well, but I'm way more positive about them than the hot tuahs. Maybe not. Banished Knights are way harder than your standard enemy. They're fast, they hit hard, but they are also never in a room with a bunch of other enemies, so I don't mind the extra challenge. If they were used as commonly as the exile soldiers, I don't think I would have mentally made it through this area. And those are all the notable enemies in Stormveil. There are of course more, like dogs, bats, rats, jars, big jars. But they aren't nearly as important to Stormveil as the ones I've talked about are. Let's move up a class to the elite enemies. I classify elite enemies as enemies that are usually a one-off within an area and provide a memorable combat challenge during the exploration of the level. These enemies usually don't respawn when you rest at a grace. Sorry Omen, you are really not special enough to be considered an elite. Hey, don't bring it out on the dog. Stormveil Castle has 4 elite enemies: a Crucible Knight, a Lion Guardian, a Grafted Scion, and an Ulcerated Tree Spirit. All serve their purpose well of being combat challenges that break up the exploration. They are all fairly out of the way. You have to already be exploring to discover them. They are your reward for being thorough. It was pretty hard choosing a least favorite one. Okay, I'm lying, the Ulcerated Tree Spirit sucks dick. I like where it's placed. It kinda feels like the boss of the creepy part of Stormveil. It even has a phase 2. But they are just never fun to fight. They are so big, it is hard to tell what attack they are even throwing out. The other 3 are really good though. Out of them, I probably like the Lion Guardian the least. It actually has a really great moveset. That isn't the issue. The issue is where it is placed. The Lion Guardian guards the entrance to the path towards the Divine Tower. This is located next to the main path, which means if you want to have a proper 1v1 against the Lion, you will have to take out all the exile soldiers, as they will all be aggroed on you. It takes quite a while to take them all out, and it does bring down the overall experience of fighting the Lion. As I said, I still find him really fun. His external annoyances just disable me from putting him any higher. In second place sits the Grafted Scion. I actually like his moveset less than the Lion Guardian, but it is way easier taking out all the enemies surrounding him as they aren't spammed everywhere. I also really like the room he is placed in. I love the various limbs all hanging from the ceiling, and I especially love the Godfrey painting, which I've called the Godwin painting the entire video. But my favorite elite enemy in Stormveil is of course the Crucible Knight. He is completely isolated from everything else. There are no enemies on the way here, unless you count the hop tours, but they can't come down here. Take that, Haley Welch! So you are guaranteed to get a good old-fashioned duel. He even has a second phase. So I think the elite enemies in Stormveil are very good. With 3 good ones and 1 not so good one, I'm very happy with what they have here. But finally, there is only one last thing to talk about. The main man himself, the King of Warriors, the Shining Knight. I made that all up. It's Godric the Grafted.
I am the Lord of all that is golden.
I won't be going into too much detail about Godric just in case I decide to make a boss ranking video on Elden Ring in the future, but I do want to talk about some of the more broad stuff here. To put it simply, Godric might be my favorite tutorial boss ever. I mean, he isn't technically the tutorial boss, Margit is the real first boss of the game, or Soldier of God, Rick. But Godric is the first remembrance boss that 99% of players will fight. Okay, Gamer King 123, I don't care that you fought Moog first, shut up. Godric is so perfectly designed to be challenging enough for new players, but not so hard where players will give up. This fits into his lore as well, as he is considered the most pathetic demigod. This guy reinforces the rules that Margit taught you. This is Elden Ring, not Dark Souls 3. You will have to deal with lots of delayed attacks, tricky timings, and utilize the jump to dodge some attacks. Phase 2 adds some fire attacks with his new dragon hand that all look really cool. My one significant issue with the fight is that this wind attack is basically impossible to dodge if you are right next to him. It comes out so quickly that you just can't react to it in time. It doesn't do too much damage, so it isn't the end of the world, but it is still pretty stupid. And that concludes the combat section of this video. Overall, while I still think Stormveil does combat very well, the placement of the exile soldiers in some sections and the existence of the hot tours do bring it down just a bit. I will be giving the combat a 13 out of 20, which does sound a little bit low, but keep in mind that an average score in my mind is 50%. I am not IGN, so I still think Stormveil's combat is fairly above average. Stormveil had the important job of being an introduction to Elden Ring's legacy dungeons. Do I think this area is worthy? Yeah, of course I do. This area is amazing. Receiving a 40 out of 50, I think I have proven to you and myself that Stormveil is as good as the majority of the community say it is. If the combat was a little bit more fun and balanced, Stormveil could have been even better, but an 80% grade is no easy feat. Maybe I could have gotten 80% in school, that would be nice. Anyways, thank you for watching this dumb review. Hopefully I will be motivated enough to pump out content more often. That would be fun. See you next time.